Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on the local Colorado economy and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host, Chris Gorog, brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. Chris is personable and opens up with our guests on the issues we all would like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's New Cyber Frontier.
So welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On with me today, we have the CTO of Plex Solutions, Terry Bradley. And I've been joking with him, Terry Bradshaw, but Terry Bradley it is. So Terry, welcome today.
Thank you, Chris.
And we're glad to have you on. The conversation we've had a couple times about what he does with penetration testing and security assessments is right on par with what so many people are looking for, and students today in the university here where I teach and many other places are just hungry for how do we get into this. So Terry has a great, exciting talk for us here today. But Terry, first of all, tell us your background. How did you get to where you're at in the cybersecurity world?
Sure. So I started out as a cadet right here in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy, and was very interested in computer science and programming and all those things as a cadet, but didn't have the math skills I needed to be a hardcore computer scientist. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up going a little bit more fuzzy route and went into intelligence in the Air Force. And over the time in my career in the Air Force, I picked up a master's degree in management information systems and started to do some self-study on what back in the 90s was called information warfare, information operations. And when I got out of the Air Force, I was able to land a job as a project manager at the National Security Agency in an office that did security testing on U.S. systems. And from there, I picked up more technical training, more hands-on experience, and slowly worked my way back into the tech side of things as a penetration tester and vulnerability security analyst.
So you're one of those spooks from the NSA, or at least in a previous life, right?
Well, I guess you could say that, yes.
Yeah. So everybody's always interested about that kind of cloak and dagger stuff. Was it exciting spy type stuff like you hear on TV, or was it just kind of another boring analyst job working like you would at a company?
Well, it's a big organization, and there's all kinds of people who work there. But there are some really exciting missions that they have, and you get to see kind of at the world stage what's happening in terms of cyber operations. What nation-state capabilities exist out there, mm-hmm. and you as a security professional, you're always telling people what could happen. When you work in the intelligence community, in the cyber field, you know that a lot of these things are not just could happens, but they do happen.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, that's interesting. Any job that you've had since you've been at the NSA that might be similar or having that type of insight that you would recommend to somebody if they're really interested in that but don't want to be in the NSA or government?
Sure. So, in my previous job to Plex Solutions, I led the red team for Booz Allen Hamilton. And mm-hmm. As the red team manager, we kind of sought to put together a program that would simulate adversary threats, mm-hmm. That would establish a adversary presence on the corporate network and train our security operations staff to recognize and identify threats better. And so in essence, we were trying to be a small an intelligence service,
okay.
Providing that adversary presence on the network and identifying risks, doing long-term exploitation operations. So that was a lot of fun, and that was certainly outside of the intelligence community and the classified world. We were basically providing the service to our own company, and I think a lot of companies are starting to see the value of having not just an annual pen test, but to have continuous penetration testing, continuous security testing that not only helps make sure their defenses are working, but trains their staff to be more security aware.
Okay, you said something I want an explanation on. You said red team. So there's a couple of these people refer to all the time, red team, blue team, green team. Explain what we mean when we talk about those type of things in the security world.
Sure. So these come from, I think, probably the defense world, these terms blue team and red team. And, blue team is the traditional, we're here to be defensive, we're here to help the system administration staff. We're focused on protecting the network. The red team is sort of that adversarial force. You might have this in an exercise. You might have even heard it from the proposal writing world, where someone comes in from the adversary or the enemy or the competitor perspective and tries to identify security risks, tries to identify flaws in your plan. And so for a cyber red team, essentially what they're doing is they're acting as full-time attackers. And they're there to identify risks that hopefully you're going to get fixed. They're also there to provide that threat. So, in between real-world events, what do security operations staff do? They need some constant input and stimulus, and so internal red team can provide that to help keep the security operations center engaged and constantly learning and getting better at their job.
Okay, so we're going to break here real quick for a sponsor break. We're going to talk about these teams when we come back a little bit.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
All right, well, welcome back, and talking here to Terry Bradley about red teams, blue teams, pen testing. You also mentioned that the red team is responsible for that pen testing, which means penetration testing, going after the network. Is there a couple more teams that we hear referenced, colors by color?
So, in the exercise world, in military exercises, there's a few other teams. White team or white cell is usually the people who are running the exercise. They control the scenario.
Okay.
They're making sure training objectives are accomplished. Within the network security world, you might hear sometimes a purple team. And a purple team would kind of be a combination of a red and a blue team.
Okay.
So maybe they're doing attack and defend, but they're really more of a training type arm. So,
and I've also heard the green team.
Yeah.
More the R&D people that are working
Okay.
on next generation, putting things together.
Yeah, I think you get into a situation where this organization maybe only has a certain level of resources, and most companies don't have even a red team, let alone a blue team or a purple team or a green team. But certainly at the upper level of resources and organizational size, you could have any number of different groups or teams devoted to trying to improve the network security or cybersecurity awareness within the company.
Okay. So leading into kind of our first topic we had talked about is penetration testing. Now, you've done this for quite a while, and you had a lot of good input on people looking to get into this. What types of skills do you see that are needed?
So, as a hiring manager and a project leader, I'm constantly looking for staff, whether it's to hire someone or just to staff a project. And, we were discussing before we went on the air the different academic programs that are out there as schools and universities try to fill the gap of cybersecurity workers. There's a huge, shortage of skilled cybersecurity professionals out there. I think the academic training is great, and definitely don't look down on that in any way. But typically, I'm a lot more tactical in my decision making, and I want to know, what do you know how to do? If I put you on this project, or if I hire you onto my team, what skills are you going to bring to the team? Whether it's consulting skills or testing skills, and the thing that seems to be most lacking out there are testing skills. So, you're going to go up against this organization or this network or this application. Tell me, where do you start? What do you look for? You know, what are the techniques you use? What are the tools you use? And what is it you're trying to accomplish? What's the goal here? You know, we don't just want to throw a bunch of packets at a network or an application and say, okay, what happens? You have to have a purpose and a reason for doing that. And acquiring those skills is kind of a long-term process. So, you know, people are constantly asking me, well, where do I get these skills? How do I acquire them?
So, question about that, and I've heard this said a few times, is that sometimes that particular set of skills is thinking a little bit differently than the average person does. It might even be something that people seem to have, and you can't really train somebody to do it. It's somebody that already has it. Now, you can enhance those skills like you're talking about, but do you see that as kind of true, that people either have this or they don't?
Well, I think that some people have talent in this area.
Talent. I guess that's what I meant.
And,
yeah.
you know, some people have natural talent, and you can enhance that and channel it. And then some people don't have a lot of natural talent, and so they have to work harder. They have to study harder. They have to perhaps develop this mindset or the key qualities that make a great security tester, which are, you know, similar in a lot of ways to those that make a great hacker. I would say those are a problem-solving mindset. So, you know, you're trying to solve a problem. In this case, the problem is, how do I get into this network? How do I make this application do something that it's not supposed to do? I need to be able to break that down into steps and solve that problem. I think the other couple other skills are creativity, you know, to take a different approach, to look at the problem not the way that it's designed to be looked at. You know, a lot of security protections make a lot of assumptions that the attacker or the person that we're trying to protect the resources from is going to approach it in a certain way. How do you take a step back from that and say, I'm going to come up with a different approach, the one that they weren't expecting? And I think the final thing, and this is probably the most important that I've seen within security testing, is persistence. Security testing can be really boring, and you know, you may have to try 1,000 things before you find the one attack or one method that's going to actually get you into the application or allow you to bypass a security control. And so someone who's just absolutely persistent, who's not going to give up. I've worked with some great testers over my career, and the one thing that I think set all the really great ones apart was persistence. They would just never give up. And within the consulting world, that's hard because you have to work within a certain time frame. But you know, in other situations, you may have a longer time frame. And certainly, the real attackers, the real hackers out there, have an extended time frame to
Unlimited, right?
not necessarily unlimited. Everyone has you know, resource constraints, and so even, you know, the black hat hackers of the world, you know, they may throw in the towel if they're just wasting their time, or they feel like
They're
you
not
know,
getting
they're
any
not gonna get
value
in.
for the time.
But they
spent.
certainly have a longer time frame than most consultants do on a project.
Yeah, that's true. So you had said there was a lot of skills you see lacking when people come out and you hire them. What types of things are you seeing?
So, you know, what I really want in a security tester and someone who's going to join my team to do security testing or security consulting is someone who knows how to find security flaws, whether that's application level flaws in a application or a custom application, or configuration errors in an operating system, or, you know, problems with the way a network is set up. I want someone who has some hands-on technical testing skills. I can work with them to develop the consulting skills and client handling skills, but what I really need for them to do right out of the box is to be able to scan a network or test a network or identify security problems. And those are hard to develop. And I think as tempting as you're getting introduced to different security testing tools and testing techniques, to say, well, I want to go out and try to, you know, develop some hands-on skills. I'm gonna run this tool, or I'm gonna try this technique on the school network, or, you know, I'm gonna try it here on the company network, and, you know, probably no one will notice, or, you know, it probably won't work. But I just want to play with these tools. I want to try these different techniques, and you can get yourself in a ton of trouble. Your career can be over before it ever even starts. So generally what I recommend, and I think what the best approach is to kind of create your own little test lab, you know, at home or in some place where you're allowed to do it.
So, you know, I had a comment here because we had somebody in talking about business continuity and hiring a lot of people. to do continuity development programs for companies, said just the opposite of what you said. He said, we can get people and train them with the technical skills we need, but we can't get the people to understand the business. They have to have a bigger picture of the business. So I just wanted to bring that up because depending on what career you choose, you're coming at it from your primary need is the technology and the technical skills. But a company that works mostly on the business organization might come at it from an entirely different base need. And so I don't want every student that's listening to say, oh, we only need to focus on hard skills. There is different needs in the industry based on where the companies sit and what type of services they offer.
Sure. So, in my comment, what I'm thinking about, what I'm contemplating is a project I need to staff. I'm probably going to lead it, or one of my deputies. So those are the folks that have those consulting skills, who know how to put all the findings within a business context. And that is absolutely true, that if you don't do that, it's not going to mean anything to a customer. But those are skills that I can develop over time. I can take someone on a project, on several projects, let them see what we do, help them put the report in the right wording so that it means something to the customer. I guess those are more senior skills, and a lot of times I'm just looking for junior people to help fill out a project staff. And so when I think about the immediate skills I need, it's more those hands-on technical skills. Those consulting skills, the business understanding, those take longer to develop. Mm-hmm. And I would say that those are the things you're going to build upon that technical foundation. But what I'm usually looking for and what I find lacking out there, what companies I think are having a hard time finding are some of those technical skills. Certainly the broader, higher level skills are also lacking. But I would probably build someone with a good technical base mm-hmm. into a great consultant, rather than try to take someone who's a great consultant in, say, business or finance and try to get them the technical skills. I think that would be a harder path to follow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you were talking about the skills that are lacking, and you had some great testing solutions and some stuff you were going to show us, and we'll even try to get some screen captures to put up on the video, hopefully.
Right.
But talk about what you're recommending people use to brush up on those skills that you're talking about.
Right. So I have people call me all the time and say, how do I get into this field? How do I learn how to do this security testing? And the thing I always try to direct people toward is not trying these.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to take a commercial break, and then we'll start that
okay.
line of reasoning again. So let's take a break here real quick for sponsors. Let's take a break here real quick for messages from our sponsors, and then we'll get back and talk about the tools that you recommend for helping people brush up on those skills.
Okay.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Over 3 million data breaches happen every single day. That's over 2,000 records being compromised every minute. So often, we focus on securing web data access. But what if the attackers are already inside, having gained direct access to your storage through data management software? When it comes to communications that go directly into your storage devices, make SNIA your first line of protection. SNIA's conformance testing limits outdated communications that are known to be used by attackers. It works continuously behind the background to make sure your storage is protected. To find out if your data is truly secure, visit our website at www.snia.org/cybertest.
All right, so welcome back. Here still with Terry Bradley, talking some great insight for penetration testers and people want to get into cybersecurity, vulnerability assessments, penetration testing. And we had talked earlier, you had some great tools that you recommend for helping people to fill in those knowledge gaps and those experience gaps and actual hit on the ground working on penetration testing knowledge. What do you recommend?
So you've often heard it said that to start learning these skills and to learn how to use different tools and techniques, you should set up a test lab. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of that. The trouble is when you go to set up a test lab at home or wherever you're setting this lab up, is this can take a lot of time, it can take a lot of money. it can almost become a pursuit in and of itself. And the goal here is to learn how to do some of this testing, and you almost end up losing focus of what you set out to do in the first place. So what I recommend to people is not that they can't set up their own test lab with lots of different operating systems and applications, but to start with something very easy that's going to get you up and running quick. And there's a lot of great resources on the internet. There's certain websites that you're allowed to run tools against or try to hack, but those come and go. And maybe this week there's some hacker contest going on at such and such web address, but by next year the contest is over and that website's gone. So I recommend people download some of the virtual machines that are out there that have built-in vulnerable applications. I think the best one out there is put out by a company called Maven Security, and it's Web Dojo.
Okay.
So the Web Security Dojo. Most people just call it Web Dojo.
Just like a training for your mind on the web.
Right. Yeah.
But you have nothing. You're not affiliated with this. You don't make.
No,
any,
I've
any
never
money
even
off of this.
met these people, but I've used this environment and I've recommended it to a lot of different people. The address is dojo.mavensecurity.com. If you just go to Google and search for Web Dojo, you'll find the website. They've also got a SourceForge site where you can download all the files you need. Mm-hmm. And this comes in the form of a virtual machine. You can run the virtual machine in VirtualBox for free. Okay. So if you don't want to spend any money, just download VirtualBox from, I think Oracle makes that, and you can run the Web Dojo within VirtualBox. You can also import it into VMware. If you have VMware set up on your system and you like VMware, it imports just fine into VMware. And you can now boot up this virtual machine that has not only several targets within it that you can attack, so they're applications, they're websites that have vulnerabilities that are easy to find and varying levels of difficulty. It also comes with all the tools you would need to run against these applications and sites. Mm-hmm. So these are hacker tools or security testing tools, things like Burp Suite, SQL Map, has Nmap already built in, so you don't have to do any installing. Maybe you're not a Linux guru and you don't want to have to go chase after dependencies or learn a bunch of esoteric commands. You'll get to those eventually, but you can start right off using Maven Security's Web Dojo to start learning how to security test different applications and websites. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great tutorials out there on YouTube and Vimeo. So even if you're not sure where to start, you can look up each of the different exercises out there on the internet, and someone has probably already done a step-by-step tutorial on how to walk you through testing the different applications.
Interesting. And you said you had some that you were gonna walk us through or whatever. You wanted to look at that. If
right,
that would be interesting, and I'll put some images up on the video portion of the podcast for people to look at. But walk us through something and give us an example of it.
Sure. So I've booted up into Web Dojo here in VMware, and if I launch the Firefox browser, it automatically takes me to the Dojo homepage, and it gives me a list of the applications that are built into to Web Dojo. The very first one is one called Damn Vulnerable Web App. Mm-hmm. And DVWA for short, and DVWA has a whole bunch of security flaws built into it. Okay. It's already running as soon as you boot up the application, so you just have to click on the link for DVWA, and it'll take you out to the start page, the login screen of this vulnerable web app. Mm-hmm. And Web Dojo gives you the password right there on the homepage, so you log into the web app, and there are several different tests that you can run. There's a test for cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection, blind SQL injection, command injection, all the different security flaws that...
And we won't go through all those, what they mean, just that they are all different types of vulnerabilities in web applications or applications running on your computer that you can then, as an attacker, use to go get into that application.
Right. So each of these has varying levels of difficulty. You can set the security level of the environment. I recommend when you're first starting out, you set the security level to low. You want to be able to find some things. You want to be able to play with these tools and these vulnerabilities and learn how to do some exploitation. But after you've mastered the low level, you can move it up to medium. And it will put certain filters in place that you'll have to try to get around or evade or defeat. And there's even a high security level. And so there's a lot of learning you can do just within this virtual environment. I was going to kind of talk through the SQL injection exercise within the application, because I think that's a very dangerous security flaw that a lot of...
So first of all, explain how an SQL injection is able to work.
Sure. So there are a lot of applications out there that take user input. And based upon the user input, say maybe a username and a password, there are things that happen on the back end of that application. So behind the scenes, where you can't necessarily touch or control, it takes that user input and does a lookup in some sort of a database. Maybe it's going to look to see, is this username part of the database? And is the password...
And this database could have thousands of other people's information in it, millions, their credit card numbers, their addresses, all kinds of things about them that become private information.
Absolutely. Depending on what the application is and what it's used for, it may have all kinds of different databases within the application. And so SQL injection happens when a user is able to supply data that not only has, say, a username and a password, but it also has some SQL commands in it. So depending on how the application...
And SQL is structured query language.
Right.
And it's the language that tells the database what to get out of its storage and send back to the application that called it.
Correct. So, what if I send in not only a username, but I send in some SQL commands saying, I want you to perform some action, whether it's to look up information or to change information, or even possibly delete information. And you would think that
And
an
an
application...
example that I've heard is basically you send your username and say, here's my name, and oh, by the way, send me the name of the next 10,000 people that have credit card number that begins with 1.
Sure. So you would think that an application wouldn't let you do that, but it all depends on what protections are in place to make sure that malicious or devious users don't send in commands to the database. And different applications are better or worse at filtering out that kind of an attack. And of course, in DVWA, there's almost no filtering. It will readily accept not only the user data, but it will also let you send in database commands and retrieve information from this back-end database.
Okay. And the most dangerous of these are like a delete all or send me all the information that gives me credit card numbers as well, things like that. Now, how does an application become safe at these versus allowing it to happen?
There's a lot of different strategies on how you prevent this from happening. I think probably the best, one of the best resources out there, OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, has an SQL injection, what they call a cheat sheet, and they talk about how SQL injection flaws happen, and then also several different strategies to prevent them.
So yeah, we'll leave you with that reference. Go look it up.
Yeah.
But that's how that now when you develop your database, your website, you have to do a lot of things to make it so the hackers can't do this.
Yeah, and if you're a web developer or a database developer and you're asking yourself, what's SQL injection? That's why these problems exist.
Yeah.
Is developers aren't necessarily skilled in knowing what the attacks are against their applications. And it's not necessarily super difficult to filter this or to prevent it. But if you don't know about it, you're probably not doing very much to prevent it.
Yeah. So finish with your demo here. What else can we do there with this Web Dojo?
So if you go into the DVWA and you log in first, username is admin, password is password, you get to a screen that basically has a list of exercises over on the left-hand side. And go just log in real quick and bring it up. You'll see brute force, command execution, CSRF, which is cross-site request forgery, an insecure CAPTCHA, file inclusion, and the next one is SQL injection. Before I go into that, though, I'm going to click on the DVWA security level, and I'm going to set it to low because I want to make sure that we're able to do this exploit. and then go back to SQL injection page. And what you'll see is just a field where it's asking you for a user ID. If you put 1 in or something, it's going to return, okay, yeah, user number 1 is admin, surname admin. And you're like, okay, this is an application that looks up a username. A manual way to test for SQL injection, and this is a very trivial example, would be to send in a special character. And within structured query language, one of the significant special characters you could put in would be an apostrophe, or we call it a single tick. And a lot of times when you're testing manually for SQL injection, you might just put in a username or a data value and append a single apostrophe to it and look for an unusual error message. So if we submit a single tick to the DVWA SQL injection app, we get, you have an error in your SQL syntax. And it goes on to explain that I've put some special characters in, and it talks about a line of code. And you're like, wait a second, I think I've just escaped the normal flow of this program. I've kind of gone off the rails. And it looks like we've got an error that's not really handled very safely. So, instead of sending in a single tick, what if I send in something a little bit more creative?
So the single tick, and we use that when we're instructing as well. Any box on the internet, on a website, if you put a single tick in, if it is vulnerable to SQL injection, that will give you an error message because of that, because that is a character that's not recognized by SQL.
Correct. So, if I want to do more manual testing, it's probably possible to exploit this manually, but generally speaking, when you're doing security testing, you're going to do a lot of automated scanning, and the kinds of queries you'll have to send in are going to be quite complex. And to speed things along for the consultants of the world, and to live within your project time constraints, usually we'll use a tool like SQL Map that will go in and try a whole bunch of combinations that it's programmed to know how to do, to look for vulnerabilities not only that are easy to find but hard to find. And so if you go back to the tools menu of WebDojo and you click on SQL Map, it'll bring up a Linux terminal that has the SQL Map application, and we can run SQL Map against this DVWA. The syntax is fairly simple. It's sqlmap /sqlmap.py because it's written in Python. And then you have to supply a few parameters. In this case, the URL, and then you're going to have to tell it, where to start within that application. Now, if you run this unauthenticated, you're not going to find any SQL injection. You have to actually be authenticated. And I would encourage you to look at tutorials on the internet. They'll explain how to retrieve a cookie value from the application using Burp Suite. It's very easy to cut and paste that cookie value into your SQL map. And once you have that authenticated cookie value and you run it simply against the page that has the SQL input box, within less than 30 seconds, you're going to find an SQL injection flaw in this application. And then you can try all the exploitation commands that dump the database.
Yeah.
That
then you get the good stuff.
Yeah, you can dump all the information within the database. You can reveal usernames, passwords. SQL Map will even crack some of those passwords for you. And you begin to see, okay, this would be valuable to an organization to know that an attacker could do this to my application, and then they explain to the customer how to prevent that from happening.
So the very interesting demo, and I'm glad you went through that. As far as now, you work with customers all the time and help them identify vulnerabilities, work in penetration testing. Tell us what you do and how people can get a hold of you to help them. When would they engage you? Things like that.
Sure. So my company, Plex Solutions, we do security testing. We do cybersecurity consulting. Kind of the full gamut from security assessments to red team engagements. And those are kind of references to the scope of what you want tested. Security assessment is probably very tightly constrained to, we want you to look at this in particular, and we don't want you to do certain other things that would be, sneaky or possibly disruptive to our business operations, to red team, which is the other end of the spectrum, which is, hey, we recognize that security threats don't play by the rules. We want you guys to have a broader scope. We're okay if you are going to sneak in the back door of our organization to demonstrate security issues. We are okay with you sending in phishing emails or running fake wireless access points outside of our building to see if our staff will connect to them. So it's a full range of security testing depending on the scope that you want to focus on.
And they could contact you from your website?
Absolutely.
Which is?
Plex-LLC, Plex-LLC.com. We are an NSA accredited vulnerability assessment provider.
Which is a really powerful statement there.
We're one of only 5 companies in the world that currently have this accreditation with the NSA. They've reviewed our processes and procedures to ensure that we're going to provide our customers with a quality product.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining today, and we definitely will put the link on the write-up for this as well, so people can look over and look up what you do. But thanks, Terry.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right. Have a good day.
Okay.
The views or opinions expressed by me during this podcast are my own and are not those of my employer, Colorado Technical University.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.